I'm curious. I am curious. Curious.
By nature.
Welcome to Curious by Nature. I'm Jessica Johnson from Newswise. Many of us have an idea of the stereotypical business executives. Calculating and analytical, they leave their feelings at the door. In order to make good decisions, we expect business leaders to be emotionally neutral, basing their judgments solely on the numbers. But in reality, to ignore emotions is a recipe for failure. Understanding companies' strengths and weaknesses, customers' buying decisions, and threats from the competition all rely heavily on emotions to guide us. Acknowledgement of feelings, addressing them, and processing them can reveal a path to success in business. Our guest this time from Aalto University in Finland is an expert on harvesting the constructive energy of our emotions to bring out transformative change in the companies he studies. Dr. Vuori, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Timo Vuori, strategy professor from Aalto University in Finland.
Can you finish this sentence? I'm curious about.
I'm curious about how emotions give us energy and make us grow, but how they sometimes also make us destroy everything.
And can you tell me about your work overall and in general what you do?
I do research on how companies make major strategic decisions, and in particular, how emotions and other psychological forces influence those decisions. And then I teach these insights to executives and students in Finland and elsewhere in the world, and basically help leaders create processes that enable them make better choices and get them implemented more effectively.
Would you like to mention any particular research studies, either the most recent ones or ones that you find maybe are particularly important?
I think the most important thing I've done is research on Nokia, the phone company, and their strategic failure when iPhone and Android entered the phone markets, and how they tried to make sense of the competitive threat, but then due to anxiety, fear, and other emotions, they were unable to fully understand the implications for them as a company, and then made some really bad choices. And also how they, after that, learned to recognize the importance of emotions and manage those emotions better. So I interviewed basically all the top managers and board members, and we really went through the decision-making processes in detail, and they explained to me how initially there was a lot of fear of the new competition, which made them kind of blind to the threat and unwilling to discuss it. And then after that, they started having this wishful thinking and hopes of predominance in the phone industry with Microsoft Windows Mobile, and that of course then didn't go well. And then they said how they now understand that their emotions were driving their decisions and we have to manage them better. And then they very intentionally created processes and practices that first acknowledged the power of emotions and then kind of integrated emotion management in the decision-making process. So even the top leaders were speaking about how they feel and how they treat one another with respect, and this then helped them kind of gain better understanding of the reality and make better choices in the end.
So from your research, you're basically saying that emotions can really affect negatively companies. Have you seen examples of the positive addressing of those emotions and how that positively affects companies?
Yeah, actually, it's a really good point, and in two ways. So one thing is that emotions always influence decisions, and in these extreme cases that I described, the impact has been very negative or harmful for the company. But oftentimes emotions have a beneficial impact on what people do and what they decide. So we seek growth and we want to learn things because we have dreams or goals that we are emotionally attached to. So emotions really drive our development, and curiosity drives us to explore, and even fear can motivate us to take action on important topics. So the COVID vaccination was developed really fast because everyone was afraid of the pandemic. So fear really drove innovation. So emotions can impact both ways. And then second part of this is that how you manage your emotions or the emotions in your organization so that the force of emotions becomes beneficial rather than distracting or harmful. And a lot of the work that I do with executives and research is about this, that how you first create a climate and some specific practices for bringing up and out the emotions so people can tell what they feel, and then reflect, is this emotion driving us in the right direction or wrong direction, and how you can change that emotion in a way that sometimes it helps, and sometimes it's about calming down. So I understand that I'm really afraid or anxious, and that makes me think in a short-sighted way. So what can we do to feel safer and take it easy and look at the bigger picture? Other times it's really stimulating a positive excitement. So we should expand in this new product category, but it's a bit vague, so we are a bit hesitant. But when we do, let's say, some physical prototypes or playing with the products, we learn about them, and that makes us excited and creates kind of passion for taking action. And in this kind of very different ways, when you really see the strategic situation, the action that is needed, and then you understand how emotions either motivate or hinder that action, you can design ways to kind of optimize the emotional experience so people do the right thing in an emotion-driven way.
What do you think went into this emotional decision that possibly was a negative decision by Elon Musk to buy Twitter, and then his next emotional decision to try to get out of it? What do you think went into that whole process, and how did that work out like that?
Yeah, I think it's combination. He seems to have relatively high self-confidence or overconfidence and hubris. So he tends to believe that he is able to do things better than anyone else. And then I think he got angry at some of the policies that Twitter was using. And that triggered him to make the offer that they are doing things wrong. I'm smartest, so I can do it better. And because of this strong emotion and the urgency to get it done, he didn't do the due diligence very deeply and learned about the fake accounts and other reasons that he later cited as reasons why the deal should be cancelled. So he learned about those only later on. So I think it was driven by a combination of frustration and anger and overconfidence that made him make the decision and skip the careful consideration.
But then he quickly realized it, right? I mean, there's this very fast back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's how emotions work. So you get the urge and impulse, and then you sleep overnight, and then you realize that you have made a mistake.
How can business leaders judge whether the negative emotions are leading to good decisions versus decisions that may be irrational or short-sighted?
That's a great one, and that's the biggest challenge in strategy making. So many of the examples we have now discussed have been cases where we know the right answer, so then it's easy to kind of build emotions to motivate that kind of action. But when you're making really big decisions, you don't know the right answer when you start the decision-making process. So then exactly you don't know if this emotion is beneficial or not. And that's when you need to design the decision-making process itself in a way that it enables you to learn more about the long-term consequences of the options and internalize these long-term consequences so vividly that you start feeling emotions that are aligned with what could be called rational analysis.
So I was introduced to your work from a post that you did maybe a few months ago about 7 different points, takeaways about your work and things that you have learned. And I found it really fascinating. One of the things that stood out to me was the idea of how negative emotions are highly beneficial. And I was wondering if you could tell me about that.
Let's start with one concrete example. So about fear and how fear of competition, so competing firms can really drive companies to innovate. So if you are making, let's say, food, and you're innovating new milk-based products, for instance, and if you are not afraid of the plant-based substitutes for milk, you're happy with innovating your own products. But if you get exposed to the substitutes like soy-based milk and oat-based milk, and you start fearing that these might actually replace our products, then that drives you to think of what should we do better? How can we appeal to the customer more? And what new kind of health features can we add to our products? And you kind of get this fear-driven innovation culture that is still very positive, in the sense that it's not that the organization members are afraid of the angry boss who is pushing them to work harder, but they really see the external threat and want to do better because of that. That's one example. And in concrete terms, I've advised companies that they should use their competitors' products as much as possible rather than their own products, because that stimulates this healthy fear. So we go back to the milk company example. In their office cafeteria, they would usually have only their own products and employees would eat them. But after they started introducing the competitors' products there, the employees were constantly exposed to them, and that then motivated them to act.
You had a recent research article, Emotions and Intentional Engagement and the Attention-Based View of the Firm.
Yeah. So the attention-based view itself starts from the idea that what firms do is heavily dependent on what their leaders pay attention to, because you can only make decisions about topics that you attend to. So management and attention is central variable. And prior research has looked at like formal practices and how they guide managerial attention. And my paper then integrates emotions into this attention-based view and argues that emotional reactions significantly shape managerial attention, and therefore emotional reactions significantly shape the decisions that managers ultimately make. And then I introduced these 5 practices that firms can intentionally use to associate more positive emotions with topics that need more attention, and then less positive or negative emotions on topics that should be discussed less.
Are there any questions that I haven't asked you that you would like to answer or things to talk about?
It's about what triggers emotions in people and especially leaders. And I think this is important to understand because we often tend to think that leaders are super rational and they just influence the emotions for others, and if leaders have emotional problems, it's because of their personality. But that's kind of treating leaders with different standards than other people. So we really need to understand that leaders are people also, and the challenges that they face. And I think two main mechanisms that need to be better understood is, one is that there, at the industry level, we often see disruptions. So you have kind of stable industry, then there is a new technology or new regulation, and it changes the rules of the game in the industry, and then some other companies become winners and others losers, and this is kind of natural evolution. But when you look at it from the perspective of one company or one leader, it's really existential. So you have, for 20 years, being the top performer in this industry, and then suddenly they change the rules, and all your strengths become liabilities, and everything you know becomes irrelevant. So it's very natural to feel very strong emotions in this kind of situation, and it's anger, fear, anxiety, and those powerful emotions very easily make us then make those mistakes that we discussed. And if you don't manage the emotions, then your company becomes the loser. But if you manage them, then you have better chance. But I think here being really empathic toward the leaders and understanding that they face really challenging situations, and not only their own ego and company is under threat, but they might have thousands of employees whose livelihood is at stake as well. So it's huge kind of personal responsibility and consequences. So appreciating that side of it, kind of being a top leader also. And then another one that often happens is more on the, let's say, middle management level, but you have companies trying to renew so that they have their established core business, and then they create new businesses on the side to kind of see if that new business could grow into something big. And while this is very rational and probably the best way of renewing a company or dealing with disruption, it's emotionally really difficult for these people, because from the point of view of the core business, it's kind of you can think of analogy to a marriage situation. So you have a like staying marriage, and if you want to renew the marriage, it's like you take a lover and try to see if you can build a new life for yourself and grow something big. But that's of course like horrible from the partner's point of view. But when you renew a company in that way, you kind of the new initiative is it might be the future, but the people working in the core business can feel really undervalued and threatened, and that often creates a lot of conflict between these departments and politicking and backstabbing and things like that. So really appreciating the structural forces behind the emotions. The emotions are not caused by individual level qualities but rather the forces that influence many people. And this goes back to why psychologists alone cannot fix things, because the forces are bigger than individuals.
But would you find that it's helpful? Would you recommend it for the leaders to have that psychological support?
It's definitely helpful, and I have nothing against psychologists, so it's helpful, but often it's not enough.
Right. For the whole institution.
Right.
What are the books that you have in your background?
They are about strategy. So the orange one that's published in Finnish, but it's entitled Living Strategy. So I wrote it with the CEO of the largest financial institute in Finland, and we speak about how companies should constantly create scenarios and evaluate the scenarios and update their decisions to thrive in a changing environment. So about kind of how you are not blocked by your emotions, but can stay tuned to the reality and update your choice. And then the black one is platform strategy. So that one I wrote with Tero Ojanperä, who was Nokia Chief Technology Officer and more recently one of the founders of Silo AI, which is an AI company that was just acquired by AMD for 600 million or something. But it describes how established firms can use digital platforms, AI, to renew themselves and the related emotional challenges as well. So our first chapter is entitled Turn Fear into Energy, because he of course had seen in Nokia and other companies how fear prevented them from adopting the latest technologies and seizing the new opportunities, and then my research added to that. So
that's a very good point. Fear and emotions about AI and how people's jobs will be affected or industries will be affected.
Yeah, you have this fear related to automation and also kind of identity threats. So, AI can now do podcasts. So would it do better discussion than us discussing here and just by listening to our voices and reading our texts. So that's kind of threatening that from our self-esteem, that so you're saying computer can think like me better than I do, and what's value left in me.
Thank you so much.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.